Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time to join us for this EPIC Insight. This is Brian Lenz, Director of Sales here at EPIC Retirement Plan Services, and I'll be your host for today's call. We're joined today by Dan Fay of Stadion Money Management, with whom we've had a long-standing partnership to offer you integrated participant-level managed accounts. We're very excited to make available to you and your clients some significant enhancements to that solution. Historically, Storyline, their managed account offering, was one where Stadion controlled every aspect of the underlying investments. Now, through those enhancements, you have the ability to put your fingerprint on the construction of the managed accounts using the funds that you've selected for the plan's core lineup and/or other investments to build out that universe of asset allocations, or go as far as to assume the role of the participant level 338 yourselves. All of that at an industry low price point with no built-in revenue sharing for EPIC. With that, Dan Fay, a Senior Vice President at Stadion, will expand upon what I just rattled off and give you an update on the state of managed accounts in the retirement plan industry. Dan has spent his entire 25-year career in the business and is currently responsible for managing Stadion's institutional relationships with record keepers like EPIC and retirement plan specialist advisors. Your line will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions you'd like to run by me or Dan, please do enter those in the questions panel and we'll get to those at the conclusion of the session. With that, Dan, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. As Brian mentioned, my name is Dan Fay with Stadion. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on today's webinar to discuss our managed account services and the options, the couple options that Brian mentioned that are available through the EPIC platform. Can't say enough about the EPIC and the folks there. They've been a great partner of ours for the last several years, and we really appreciate their support. So with that, we'll jump in. Just real quick from an agenda perspective, as Brian mentioned, we'll talk a little bit in general about the managed account landscape. Then we'll spend some time talking about advisor managed accounts, which is kind of something that's really evolved over the last few years, and then wrap up with the resources that are available to support you. Before we jump in, I just wanted to spend a minute here providing an overview of Stadion for those of you that may not be familiar with us. We've been offering managed accounts to retirement plan participants for over 25 years. You can see there that we're very flexible in terms of how we offer those managed accounts, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail today. We do have a team of wholesalers that are out in the field that work exclusively through financial advisors, and they also partner very closely with their EPIC counterparts out in the field. And then lastly, as it relates to participant engagement and support, we have the ability to do both group and one-on-one meetings with participants to discuss the managed account service, and a lot of advisors will take advantage of that service that we offer, and it really helps educate those participants as to the service that they may be enrolling in. So from a managed account landscape perspective, in general, things have evolved in the retirement industry, as most of you know, over the last several years, especially since the passage of the Pension Protection Act in 2006. Things like auto features have really become part of best practice plan design, but we've also seen professional investment management options evolve as well. So as you can see on the kind of continuum there, balance funds were certainly 20 years ago, or maybe even more, were kind of that do-it-for-me vehicle that evolved into risk-based models, whether that was record keepers creating those or potentially even advisors. And then obviously target date funds really took off in 06 with PPA. And those have evolved into custom target date funds and then managed accounts. And then you can see at the end there, advisor managed accounts, which we'll spend some time on today. I think most of you know there are probably kind of three primary QDIA options, which would be the balance fund, target date funds, or managed accounts. But target date funds have really captured the lion's share of the assets, primarily because they're easy to use, conceivably easy to understand for participants, but they really only take into account one factor, and that's age. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But really, at the end of the day, we want to spend the time today discussing why managed accounts may be a better solution than a target date fund, as well as the evolution of the advisor managed account space. So today, as most of you know, we live in a world of personalization, right? Yet when it comes to retirement and people's money, there's very little personalization, especially with target date funds really kind of only taking into account the participant's age or projected retirement age. As you can see from this statistic, 80% of consumers, are more likely to do business with a company that offers a personalized experience. And I think we've seen that also within industry surveys within the retirement industry, that people want and need help, yet it's very difficult for them to get that in some cases. Managed accounts really make that personalization possible. As mentioned, a target date fund is really a single factor solution and puts everybody on the same glide path. Managed accounts, on the other hand, use a variety of individual data points to create a personalized allocation. And that allocation changes over time and actually changes as the participant's situation changes. So if somebody was to, come into some money from outside assets and provided that information, their allocation within their retirement plan would be adjusted. Obviously, as they age, their allocation becomes more conservative. So there are a lot more factors that go into the managed account compared to some other investment vehicles out there. Managed account providers also act as a participant level fiduciary and act in the best interest of participants. The one thing I do want to note, and really kind of where there's a little bit of a difference here between that participant level fiduciary and the plan level fiduciary, is that managed account providers like Stadion are only acting in that fiduciary capacity at the participant level and not at the plan level. So we do not compete by any means with the role that you're playing if you are playing a role as an advisor at the plan level. So definitely wanted to point that out. It's more of a complement than a compete. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this gives you a pretty good sense of really focused on kind of what some of historically the hurdles or objections were around managed accounts. Really the two primary objections I would say were that they were too expensive and that participants didn't engage. And if they didn't engage, it wasn't effective, yet they were paying a premium price for it. I won't even call it future state on the far right there. I would call it current state, is that costs have come down pretty significantly, and Brian alluded to that at the beginning of the presentation. And really with improvements in technology, there's more data shared so that participants do not have to engage as much as they had to in the past, but they certainly can. So really the way we view the managed account service is that it's a personalized allocation without engagement, but with the ability to engage. And I would take that even a step further, that it could be considered as a personalized QDIA if the managed account was used as a QDIA. The other thing not kind of stated here on this slide, but is that advisors have really become more involved with managed accounts, whether it's through due diligence or, as we'll talk about in a couple minutes, really playing a role in the construction of the managed account. Just a couple statistics around just managed accounts in general in the industry. So you can see here in the last, call it 15 years or so, there's been a significant increase in the adoption of managed account services at the plan sponsor level. Some industry surveys will show as well, kind of supporting that, is that sponsors believe adoption both at the plan sponsor level and at the participant level will continue to increase over time. And then lastly, and I think probably more importantly, is that you can see there on the left, compared managed accounts compared to target date fund users, the retention level of using the service is significantly higher with managed accounts. And I think that's for a couple reasons. One is that when people use a managed account service, they are communicated with regularly. through the record keeper, through the managed account provider, and they feel like somebody's taking care of them. With target date funds, I think there is some confusion out in the marketplace as to exactly how target date funds work. People, you'll see, this shows full target date fund users, right? Which means that they have 100% in one target date fund, which is obviously the right way to invest. But we've seen misuse of target date funds where people are investing, 10% across 10 different target date funds, right? Really confusion as to a target date fund is going to guarantee income at retirement. So there is some confusion out there in the industry, and I think this retention or these retention figures are really important to highlight. And with that retention really helps with the outcomes as it relates to both account balances and contribution rates. So you can see there that managed account users, wealth can increase up to 23%, and people tend to have higher contribution rates and maintain those higher contribution rates when using managed account service. So now we'll pivot a little bit more specifically to the managed account services that are available through the EPIC platform. And there's really two different options. So we have our turnkey managed account solution called Storyline. This has been available on the EPIC platform for a few years now, and this is really available to any plan today. In this case, as Brian mentioned at the beginning, Stadion handles really all aspects of the service. We act as that sole participant level fiduciary. We will use the underlying funds in the plan lineup to create the allocations, but we're making those decisions ultimately in terms of what funds we will use from that lineup in the managed account, and then ultimately determining that individual participant assignment. On the right-hand side, you'll see the custom advisor managed account solution. So obviously a little bit different, and really what this allows the advisor or the financial professional to do is to have a role in the construction of the managed account. In most cases, the advisor would act in a co-fiduciary responsibility or role with Stadion, and then typically would get involved in the selection of the underlying investments within the managed account. So it would be both, selecting the funds for the plan lineup and then ultimately determining which funds are going to be used in the managed account. And I'll get into it in a little bit more detail as to what the options are. And then can go even a little bit further, either, by yourself as the advisor or in conjunction with us, to determine those core asset allocations and or the individual participant assignment. So advisor managed accounts, as I mentioned at the beginning, have been around for a few years now and continue to get a lot of press. We continue to see interest from the largest national firms across the country, as well as some smaller regional firms. So it really has probably started the trend with some of the larger firms, but we're definitely seeing interest from others as well. And I guess the analogy that we like to draw is if you're an advisor that is doing both wealth management and retirement, on the wealth management side, you are probably using some variation of a managed account for your individual wealth management clients. You see that less on the retirement side, but really, if you think about it, you could use a very similar approach in the retirement plan that you use on the wealth side. So you can think about it from that perspective, and kind of hopefully that analogy resonates in terms of bringing your investment philosophy to the retirement plan in a scalable way. So to dive into the process a little bit deeper, as mentioned, in most cases, the advisor in the advisor managed account space would determine the underlying investments used in the managed account. And again, that can be a variety of different solutions. So it can be funds that are in the core menu. It could be if you use or have models today that you're using, we could certainly take those models and glide path those It could be outside funds outside of the core menu, whether those are mutual funds or CITs or ETFs. And then you can also have, as the advisor, some influence once those underlying investments are determined as to what the core asset allocations are. So you could determine those on your own to, ultimately say that you want to have, more active versus passive or vice versa, and then get into individual equity allocations, fixed income allocations, how much you want in large cap versus mid cap versus small cap. And we would work closely with you to determine ultimately what those core component asset allocations are. And then really the last step in the process is to determine the individual participant allocation assignments. In most of the arrangements we have set up today, Stadion is really handling this piece of it, but we do have the ability to allow the advisor to have some influence over this. The main reason why we typically handle this piece of it is because we're working directly with EPIC. We have daily file feeds where we receive individual participant data, as you can see on the right-hand side there. And typically what we've seen, just because we have that scalability to work with them, we're getting that data and we have those connections built. It's typically easier for us to do the individual participant assignment, but by no means do we have to solely, and by no means does that mean that the advisor's role is diminished, because the advisor really is playing a critical role in the construction of that managed account, even if they're not doing the individual participant assignment. I did want to spend a minute here on some of what I'll call kind of the key considerations when thinking about building an advisor managed account solution. So the first would be, is the advisor willing and or able to act in a co-fiduciary role, again, at the participant level? And in a lot of cases, that would likely depend on the firm that you might be affiliated with. We typically see that it's less of an issue or a hurdle for independent RIAs, because obviously you have that independence and ability to control things a little bit more. If you're working for maybe a larger independent broker dealer or wirehouse, what we've typically seen is that these solutions are created at the home office level and the advisors can use them. But we could certainly have a conversation about that if there was some interest in doing this. Again, what type of investments does the advisor want to use? Again, as I mentioned, it could be funds from the core lineup. It could be funds outside of that. If you wanted to have, if you didn't want to include sector funds in the core lineup, but you thought they added value to the managed account, something like that could be used. CITs, ETFs, as I mentioned. Does the advisor want to be compensated for the role that they're playing? The advisor in this case is acting in a co-fiduciary role. So ultimately needs to determine if he or she wants to be compensated. And if so, there's a couple different options that we've seen. There's the ability to add a fee on top of the managed account fee that we charge on the EPIC platform. So, that would be an option. Or instead of adding a fee to the managed account fee that the participant would pay, in some cases we've seen advisors or advisor firms add a fee at the plan level for offering the service. So they would charge the plan sponsor and or it would be passed back to the participants that way. And then lastly, how does the service or the solution, how do you want it to be implemented? This can go, there's a lot of pieces to this, but ultimately there are different ways to structure the arrangement with Stadion on the EPIC platform. Things to consider is, does the advisor want to either brand or private label the solution? We have seen that with some of the firms we're working with. So there's a variety of considerations there that we could talk through with you. We've done this many times and have the expertise to kind of walk you through what all the options would be. So lastly, just wanted to take a couple minutes here before we transition back to Brian and take any questions that folks have to talk a little bit about, the resources that are available to you, beyond me. So as mentioned at the beginning, both EPIC and Stadion have teams of wholesalers in the field working together and working specifically with advisors like you. So I'm sure your EPIC folks that are out there. Just a quick snapshot, and we can certainly follow up with this map of our team out in the field. And then the other really resource, and this really goes for either the turnkey solution or the advisor managed account solution, is we have the ability to run an illustration as to how we would create the managed account allocations using your fund lineup. So if you had a plan that you just wanted to add the turnkey solution to, we could take that lineup, run it through our system, and then walk you through how we would create the allocations at the individual participant level. And then conversely, if we're having some conversations about building a custom managed account solution, we certainly would go a little bit deeper into how we create the allocations, what our methodology is. So I'd really encourage you to reach out to either your EPIC or Stadion wholesaler for more information about the service, because this is really the piece that makes it a little bit more tangible for you to see how we do things and what the output would look like. And then lastly, we've worked with, probably most of you have heard of Fred Reese, who's a very well-known ERISA attorney. We work with Fred closely on a regular basis. We've basically created a variety of different things in conjunction with Fred as it relates to advisor managed accounts. We've also created a piece that is focused on due diligence of managed accounts and the questions to ask when doing that due diligence on the managed account provider. And then lastly, just a few weeks ago, we conducted a webinar with Fred on the benefits of QDIA re-enrollment, obviously with managed accounts being an option there, but just in general what the benefits are of kind of that, call it that reset or that QDIA re-enrollment, the benefits to participants of that. We have a recording of that. As you can see, we have a piece on the left, a marketing piece. So we're happy to share that with anybody that is interested in learning more about that as well. So I'm going to pause there and turn it back over to Brian. Hopefully everybody found that to be informative. We would love to, engage with you further should you have some interest in the custom advisor managed account solution and or the turnkey solution. We really think from a trend perspective in the marketplace, this is where things are going. As mentioned, we've seen a lot of different advisor firms interested in this space, and it'd be great to have an opportunity to talk to you more about it and hopefully an opportunity to work with you. So Brian, with that, I will turn it back over to you and happy to take any questions.
Good stuff. Thank you, Dan. We will now open up to questions. If you have those, please do enter them in the questions panel there. The first one that came in, not surprisingly, relates to fees. So I'll chime in on that and a couple of tangents related. So for the flavor we could call funds and plan, where Stadion serves as the participant level 338, we're offering that at 20 basis points. If you as an advisor or trust company take that 338 roll and make it your managed account completely, that goes down to 10. So both of those, of course, add on to whatever funds that you're using to construct it. But in any case, we're bringing this to the table at industry low price points, no juice in it to EPIC to administer or facilitate this. And I really think we're getting to the point where this can be considered as an alternative to target date funds without a big price hurdle. And it does certainly leave the door open to revenue for you. so that's one important consideration of this. If Stadion's going to be the 338 using your funds, typically we're seeing that the managed account would just be subject to the asset-based fee you have on the plan, not an additional revenue source. But if you are going to take that participant level 338 role, it is certainly an opportunity to earn more revenue, and it's all very buttoned up on our end, as in via the Go Retire web or mobile app. Participants are able to view and acknowledge your managed account agreement, your ADV, privacy policy, and we're automating all of the fee raising for that as well. They're, again, totally integrated, never leaving the EPIC site for risk profiling and opting into the managed account. So it just makes it a very clean, easy, scalable solution. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, Brian.
Point
Yeah,
Dan?
no, I think you covered everything. I would just say, as it relates to the advisor managed account, we recognize that the advisor is stepping into that fiduciary role, taking some responsibility. So we recognize that, and therefore that's why that fee is a little bit lower than the 20 basis points of the turnkey. But even with that said, that 20 basis points is probably about half of the industry average as it relates to that managed account fee that most would charge. So, I mentioned earlier that cost historically had been one of the hurdles. I think, as a firm at Stadion, and I think even to an extent with some other managed account providers, that hurdle's being overcome as it relates to the cost. And to Brian's point, I think when you look at some of the actively managed target date funds, if you took that managed account fee plus the weighted average investment expense, you could be, less than what that actively managed target date fund is.
Yeah, it makes sense, and you're getting basically the best of both worlds of risk-based asset allocation and target date funds with the glide path. So why not offer that customization if we're hitting those comparable price points? And it looks like that's all we had come in for today. So thanks again to Dan and Stadion Money Management. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining this EPIC Insight webinar. If you'd like to learn more about the updated solution, please do reach out to your EPIC RPS sales consultant or relationship manager. We'd be glad to kind of chat about implementation and get you connected with Stadion as well if you want to kick the tires further. And we will follow up with a copy of today's slides and a recording of the presentation if you want to pass that along to anyone else in your firm. Most importantly, we wish you safety and health as you support your families, colleagues, and clients. And please don't hesitate to contact us if there's anything EPIC can do to support you. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon and evening.
Thanks, everybody.